tons and tons of research based on thousands of white papers and countless think tanks. It's not a thing where they just open a, like in 12 Monkeys or, World War Z or something, where they just let something loose.
Why do you think specifically the targeting is always LGBTQ related? It's so common that churches are targeted with this. Now Hollywood is targeted with this. Pretty much everything you see anymore has a massive overrepresentation of LGBTQ influence. And that was, it's something that I've been noticing more and more and more and more, especially when it comes to when churches are represented in Hollywood. A good example of this is, have you seen the show Letterkenny, for instance? And inside of that show, it's a funny comedy, but inside the show, the priest or the acting preacher, he's gay as a $3 bill, basically queer as a $3 bill. And that's really what his entire character arc is. And I see this over and over and over and over. And I don't know why the push is always towards that specifically. That always seems to be the thing that's thrown in your face the most often now. And now we have the kind of the trans stuff in the kids' cartoons and this kind of thing. And I wonder why the push is always that direction.
So I would say that the easiest, and obviously we could always appeal to the spiritual realm and say, well, ultimately it's a spiritual problem. But to be more precise, beyond just saying that it's a spiritual issue, I would look at the way warfare has worked, psychological warfare. If you know the history of warfare and that domain, armies, governments, they've been interested in how to best demoralize and subvert the target enemy population. So that could include anything. It could include biowarfare. It could include, covert attacks. It could include bombs. It could include espionage. It could include demoralization of the enemy. And so when we understand that it's not so much a world where there's nation states at war, there is a degree of that. We're in a new world where, if you think of Howard Beale and Network, where he said, if you think of the Network quote, there's no more nation states. There's Apple, there's Google, there's Ford, there's corporations that run the world, basically. And the top people at the top of the corporations and the top of the banks basically have an agreed upon worldview. And that worldview is more or less a form of global government based around technocracy and the unification of everything under one form of some loose government, basically. And it will be run by tech. So that's the end goal. That's what they all agree on. And so the target population is no longer that country over there or this country over here in the long run. In the meantime, there's still national warfare. But in the long run, it's about the whole globe's population, the world's population, and reducing it. That's everything. So they have a Malthusian worldview. The Malthusian worldview is absolutely committed to a very serious, hardcore doctrine of reducing the world's population. Countless books on this. I've covered about 50 of them now. And that's whatever's occurring here in the now is a means to that end. So the human sexuality issues, all that is a way to sterilize. That's it. So anything that promotes sterilization is good. So I don't personally think that they really care about anyone's rights. It's not about rights. Rights is the cover that's used for soft power. What intelligence agencies used to do, I mean, they still do to some degree, but now it's done by NGOs and soft power. And a version of soft power is smart power, where this is done through internet, through Twitter, through hashtag revolutions. That's smart power. So that also plays into what you're talking about with the sexuality. So basically, it's just on a way to weaponize man's second, I guess, most basic desire after food, which is sex. So if you weaponize that, the basic desires, then you can really control the population. And empires, imperial thinkers, national government, strategists too, but they know and have known for a long time how to control people. I mean, if you read Plato's Republic, it's essentially at one level a way to control the republic. And that's why he says, well, we got tiers of people. Not everybody's the same quality of people. And at that bottom of the pyramid tier, you got to really control that population in terms of the numbers, right? So that's why Plato was an advocate of eugenics, dysgenics, infanticide, population control, because you have to really, in his view, control the bottom of the pyramid. And so this is just from the vantage point of secular civil state polity running the state. They've always seen it as, part of keeping the balance. You have to control the population. So that's, in my view, that's the easiest way to understand why it's so heavily promoted. The sexuality issues is that it's just simply basic demoralization and warfare.
Go ahead, Pedro.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Because I'm going to take it right back to some main theological stuff.
I was just going to follow up on that. Kind of.
I'm not trying to ignore the spiritual component, but
I know you're not.
We want to understand it beyond just saying, it's evil or whatever. Right. Then we want to understand the strategic component of it. That's what I'm talking about.
Sure. One of the overviews there. When you talk about global depopulation, though, we have the largest population on planet Earth we've ever had, don't we?
Yeah, that's why they're so adamant about what they're doing.
About running depopulation protocols. One of the things that I struggle with when I'm arguing with secularists is I also think that depopulation protocols are in place. And we see this through abortion in any number of different ways, sterilization programs via birth control and this kind of thing. One of the things they often come back at me with is, well, we're doing a pretty terrible job then, because there's almost 7 billion people on planet Earth. And that's kind of the secular argument that I'm smacked with on the backside, which is if these these global depopulation programs are really in place, why are they so ineffective? And a person had asked me if I'd run that question by you, and sure. I was happy to do it. So
there's two different things at work here. One is a question of how successful are the programs versus the factual question of are there such programs. So first question is, and it also assumes that if there are such programs, that they would be running in the way that this individual normie thinks. Well, they're not. And the factual question first is, let's figure out, first of all, are there such things? Well, do we know about Malthusianism? Have we read Thomas Malthus? Have we read the history of the Galton family, Sir Francis Galton? Have we read Huxley? Have we read these people whose philosophy was adopted by the American elite through the American Ivy League education establishment over the last century? So everybody probably knows about the history of the eugenics laws in the U.S. They were eventually became unpopular and were shot down. But the people who had those worldviews didn't just go away. They have always existed. And the people who have the most wealth and power in our country and in the world openly write books about this thing. So again, one of the things that I do is I lecture through those books, and I've lectured through 50 of them now, roughly speaking. So that establishes the fact that these programs exist. And we can look at things like State Department Memorandum 200 by Kissinger, which is an example of this at a government level. We can look at the famous Jaffe-Berelson memo of 1969, which shows this as a project. If you're not familiar with that, that's probably one of the most relevant documents to the topic of your show today. If you've not seen the Jaffe-Berelson memo, you need to see that.
I have not. And
okay, that is absolutely crucial. You should be aware of this. If you Google it, it'll come up in a million different places. Screenshot that and send that to any of the skeptics who say, why would there be such a thing if it's not working? Right? So now let's move to how this actually plays out. So the people who run these things, they're not stupid. They don't just release a bioweapon to kill everybody. Okay, so it's very methodical. It's very planned out. It's run at a military strategic level in different places, in different ways, based on actuaries, based on tons and tons of research, based on thousands of white papers and countless think tanks. It's not a thing where they just open a, like in 12 Monkeys or, World War Z or something, where they just let something loose. So it's methodical, and it also requires different populations getting different psyops, different strategies, right? The way to target America and the West is not going to be the same way that you target people in Papua New Guinea, or the way you target people in China, or the way you target people in the UK. You are going to target the stock of that people in the best way, the most weaponizable way that population is weak to. And this goes into anthropology research. There's a good book, for example, that David Price wrote about the CIA's history of using anthropology, of using archaeologists to do what's called ethnography, to study and master everything about specific people groups. One of the books that I wrote, that I analyzed, was the famous CIA operative Miles Copeland's book, Game of Nations. And in Game of Nations, Miles Copeland was sort of the CIA's consultant attaché guy, first to Syria during the era of pan-Arab nationalism, and then he becomes the consultant in Egypt to Nasser during that period of the Cold War. And so you're reading all this, wild stuff that the CIA was running there in Egypt. And it comes to the end of the book, and Miles Copeland says, if you're wondering what all this was about and why we were so interested in industrializing Egypt and making it a modern nation, he says, is because when you industrialize, population goes down. And he says, if you want to understand what all of the Cold War and what we're doing in these countries is ultimately about, he says, go read the Rand Corporation, the CFR, and Bertrand Russell on depopulation. So there's one of the top, most famous CIA operatives of the last century in his famous book, at the end of the book, telling you that all of these foreign operations weren't really about putting Nasser in, taking Nasser out. It's a long-term goal of reducing the world's population. That's it. That's the whole goal. Now, there's plans beyond that in terms of transhumanism. But again, I don't know how many, if people can't get that this is a factual question first, and then that it's a sophisticated rollout, hence why you see so many war game documents, SPARS, CLADEX, Event 201, Lockstep, which I just covered, right? It's very methodical. And so there's going to be stages and phases for each continent, for each country, as to how this stuff rolls out. So no, it's not going to be one program all rolled out at once. There's multiple different ways that this occurs, such as attacking food supplies, such as GMO food, such as Terminator seeds, such as, which are, for example, Bill Gates type programs, right? He has Terminator seed programs, Monsanto Terminator seed programs, such as binary weapons. A lot of people don't know what a binary weapon is. A binary weapon was discussed in Kessler's book 40, 50 years ago, where he says that what we can do is combine things in the food or water supply that are, sort of covert chemical warfare agents that will only kick in when they combine with some other chemical agent in some other arena, like maybe stabbies. Maybe you get something in a stabby that's in you that's dormant, but it doesn't get activated until it combines with another thing that's in the water supply. I'm just using that as an example. And in fact, that's Kessler's own example in his book of how the elite could use binary weapons to target the populace. So multiple books. Obama's head science czar, John P. Holdren, wrote a book called Eco-Science with Paul Ehrlich. They're both rabid depopulation proponents. And in the book Eco-Science, they discuss multiple ways that the population could be targeted, everything from the food to the water to medical tyranny. So I don't know where this person is who's a skeptic, where they were the last year, 2020. Maybe you should have paid attention to what happened in 2020, because that's one example of the phases of these things as they roll out.